profile, Karen Prell. Hello everyone, is my mic on? Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yeah, so my name is Karen Prell. I'm an animator at Bell, and this is my first time at Animex, and hopefully not the last. I'm having an awesome time. This is wonderful and inspiring for me, so it must be amazing for you guys. So thank you very much for asking me to be a part of this. And also, I used to live in England. I lived here for about 8 or 9 years a while ago. It's been 13 years since I've been in England, so I'm thrilled to be back. And here's some proper roast beef and tea. Oh, yes. So, so I'll give you a little bit of background. Many years ago, before there were video games, before there was computer animation, I worked as a puppeteer. I worked with Jim Henson and the Muppets for 16 years. I've been a Muppet fan since childhood, and that's a whole other talk about how I ended up there, but I worked on all kinds of wonderful shows like Battle Rock and Labyrinth and The Muppet Show and Sesame Street. And also helped run a puppet production company while I was living here in England. So 16 years I was a puppeteer, but in the late 1990s, film and television puppetry started getting replaced by computer animation. So around that time, I looked into animation because I'd also been a fan of animation since I was a kid, being just insanely fixated on Disney animation. And so eventually I moved back to America when I was hired by Pixar, which again is kind of a whole other story about how that happened, but and when Pixar hired me, they actually trained me to do computer animation. And I ended up working at Pixar for about 4 years, and then at a few other studios, DNA Productions, Tippett Studio, on various different TV commercials and features. I worked on the Ant Bully, which is a sweet, little-known animated film, and Disney's Enchanted. And then a few years ago, some friends of mine started working at some video game company near Seattle. I hadn't heard of it. But they were saying that this place is amazing. You should come and work here. And I said, I don't know anything about video games. And they said, it doesn't matter. Come on out. So, I was ready for a new adventure, and I had grown up in Seattle, and I knew how beautiful it was there. So, I joined Val. One of the first things I did at Val was play through this game they've done called Portal, and it just blew my mind. It was so amazing. It's like the first video game I had played, and it was Portal, and it just opened up my mind to what video games were. I love the story and the characters and how it made my brain challenged and thrilled and excited, and it was I had never imagined that video games were like this. And in addition to that, the interactive immersion of being in a video game reminded me of the immersion that I felt performing puppets while looking at a video monitor. Because you're looking at your character in third-person view while operating an input device and seeing the results on the screen.
Breaking the fourth wall.
So I was amazed that there was this form of entertainment where the audience could experience that kind of immersion in interactivity. So just as when I was a kid, I was excited about being a puppeteer or being an animator. Once I played Portal, then I got excited about working on a game just like that. When the project that eventually became Portal 2 started up, I jumped right on it, because at Valve, you just make your own opportunities. And everybody worked very hard on that game for several years, and of course it came out last year, and obviously was a huge success, winning many awards and being appreciated by people all over the world. Now, I know many of you here have dreams of creating a product as successful and entertaining as this, so I hope some of the insights I share today can help you get a little closer to achieving those goals. Now, I'd like to know how many people here played the original Portal. Okay? How many people here played Portal 2? Okay? Because, I warn you, there are spoilers. The game's been out for a while. I tried to figure out, how can I talk about all the things in this speech, but leave out the potential spoilers, and my speech would be, "Hi, I'm Karen Prell, goodbye." But there's so much that is still rewarding and surprising about this game that hopefully today you'll be inspired to finally check it out, and you will still love the way it unfolds. And when we were shipping the game, I was involved in testing and shipping for about 6 months and played the game over and over and over again. And so even when I knew what was happening, I was still thrilled and loving just the design and the presentation. So I think there's definitely still going to be a chance to enjoy it. So today I'll just do a very quick reminder of the development process that Valve does. Went into it in a lot more detail. And then I'll keep mentioning throughout my talk how that applies to how we develop the animation on Portal 2. The way we used it for some animatics and prototyping, and working out test animations. Mainly I'll be focusing on character development and execution. I'll go into a lot of detail about Wheatley, the personality sphere. I kind of specialized working on him for the game. And also a bit about GLaDOS and about Shell. And as I was putting this talk together, I realized even some interesting things about philosophy of animation movement that I'll point out to you. So as Jeep said, we work in these large cabal rooms. We've got this mix of all disciplines together, so it's so easy to communicate, inspire each other, and that team. Those are your first customers that you run ideas past. So the original Portal is one of the most innovative and popular games that Valve has ever done, and we had a lot to live up to do a sequel. The original characters obviously were very, very popular, and a lot of the popularity of the game, the characters, was just from the huge amount of novelty. And one of the things to keep in mind to try to recreate that success was not just to repeat doing the same thing, but to recreate the novelty of that first experience of Portal. So even though some of the same characters return and some of the same gameplay mechanics, we worked very hard to put a twist on the expectations of returning players, and also include some surprises that nobody expected at all. So one of the first returning elements that players experience is the Aperture Science Facility. It's been inactive for centuries, since GLaDOS was destroyed at the end of the original Portal. We originally wanted to introduce Aperture to players through a tube ride through the facility. Some of the goals we wanted to accomplish with this intro to the game was to indicate a passage of time. We wanted new players to get an idea of the twisted nature of Aperture science. For returning players, we wanted to give them a hint at the scope of the adventure that awaited them. We knew we would have to start the game with some training puzzles to help new players get up to speed, because we wanted to attract a lot of new players to this game. And so we wanted returning players to know that bigger and better things were on the way once the initial training was done. To first test out ideas for this tube ride introduction, we just did very low res Maya play blast animatics. It was very quick to iterate on it, very quick to render. Didn't have to take time building maps or models and compiling them in game. We just put it together, stick this movie in front of the game when we had brought people in to test, just so they would see this movie, and then when it finished, it would go into gameplay. So it was a very quick and effective way to prototype. And so what I'll show you here is a condensed edit of one version of that animatic that played at the beginning of the game.
Activated. Hello. You have been detained. Relaxation mode. 9 0 0 0 4 0. Target acquired.
Hey, what's going on over there? I don't see anything. Why am I not surprised?
So a few different versions of this started out in a ratman den or in a confinement cell that seemed to indicate that the humans were being bred and raised to be test subjects. But we found through testing that there was just like too much information in this video. It was very confusing out of context. Players didn't understand why this was happening to them or who they were. So we reworked how to achieve our goals. First of all, we realized, well, probably if Gladys is out of action and she's the one that was powering Aperture Science, then probably most of Aperture, including the tubes, would really not be working at the beginning of this game. And in addition to that, we wanted to change how the different ideas were introduced to the player, just kind of ease them into the ideas and the experience. So the next version of the intro, by this time we actually started with in-game experiences. First, just very rough prototypes, and then expanded on them. So initially, they start in a hotel room, and the vocals indicate that it's not just a hotel room, but some kind of stasis compartment. Next, there's a passage of time, and just with the change in art and vocals, they realize it's been a huge passage of time. A lot of things have deteriorated, and starting out in a newer, cleaner room and then changing to an older one made it very clear that a huge amount of time had passed rather than just starting in something that was already old and damaged. It really gave them an idea of the scope of time we've been through. We added some training during this part of the intro, again, to help the new players that we wanted to introduce to the game, but we did it in a fun and novel way that returning players would also enjoy. There were bits of indications in the vocals and in some of the signage that the players experience. It gives new players an idea of how the twisted way that aperture science works. As this intro progressed, we gave players peeks at vistas around there to give them an idea of the scope of the adventure that awaited them. And as this intro got more dangerous and threatening, it was very clear to the players that they were in a pretty bad situation, and they better figure out a way to get out of there, just to help them motivate them with the ultimate goal of the game, which was to escape. This intro was executed in a pretty complicated way. We had the hotel room was actually in a container, and to accomplish the effects that happens, there were two separate and nested simulations in this container. Coarser effects for the bigger movements, and finer ones for all the debris and furniture. But we couldn't have the player actually in that area while the simulations would be happening because of the extra calculations to make everything interact with the player. So the player is actually in this little concrete bunker in another part of the map, so that they could still move around and hit walls that matched up with the walls in the container, but they were just free of all the simulation that was happening. Meanwhile, the player's camera was riding in the container that had all the debris happening. Pretty amazing stuff.
Nobody tells me anything. No, why should you tell me anything? Why should I be kept informed? You know, about the life functions of the 10,000 bloody test subjects I'm supposed to be in charge of. Why? It's close. Can you see? I'm going to make it through, but not enough space. Just gotta get through here. Right. There we go. Now, I'll be honest, you are probably in no fit state to run this particular type of cognitive gauntlet. But at least you're a good jumper. So you got that. You got the jumping on your side.
So once we showed this to testers, just the types of ideas that were introduced them, and just the very well-paced linear way, passage of time. Oh, this is strange. Oh, it's dangerous. Oh, I better get out of here. And players totally understood that where they were, that they had to get out of there. They were motivated to get out of there, and they were entertained as well. So prototyping and testing and refocusing on how to achieve our goals worked out very successfully for this. And here. And of course, the tour guide and bad navigator is Wheatley, the personality sphere, voiced by Stephen Merchant. Wheatley ends up going through much of the game with the player, and he has quite a lot of purpose in the game. In the first game, GLaDOS, or the voice of GLaDOS, is with the player pretty much from the beginning to provide narrative and kind of fill them in on where they are and what's going on, and help guide them in their goals. But she's out of commission at the start of this game. So Wheatley is able to provide that narrative in her absence. So he helps get the player motivated towards their goal of escape. And he fills in the player on the story of what's happened since the last game, and also new players kind of get up to speed with what that situation is. He provides comedy, not because he's trying to be a comedian, but just because of his delusional perspective on everything. He provides pacing breaks from solving puzzles. He also provides access to different parts of the facility the player needs to get to by helping unlock doors and run elevators. Later on in the game, he provides challenges and obstacles to the player, and ultimately even helps the player escape.
Or does he?
So so Wheatley, to accomplish all of this, needs to be a very believable and enjoyable character. We definitely wanted an enhanced design to match the fidelity of the game. We wanted strong, clear expressions that the player could read. So our first tests were, we just had to prove that an eyeball could act. So we started out doing some tests with one of the personality cores from the original Portal.
This is a really bad idea. We're in so much trouble. Put me down. Oh. Oh my God. Oh.
So you can see that a lot of life was expressed just by the head attitudes and the eye contact and the speed and amount of movement that this character is making. He didn't even have eyelids yet, and of course he has no mouth. We briefly talked about, did we want to try mechanically doing squash and stretch with him, but we realized that would get in the way of how his handles would work. And they were very effective as stand-ins for brows and cheeks, and they were a lot more important in his expression. So we realized we didn't need squash and stretch. Next, we wanted to explore the mechanical aspects of Wheatley. So various people did some tests exploring that.
Bloody hell. Lady, have you lost your mind?
So after showing these around the team, we decided we wanted to avoid something that was too extreme and too difficult for players to relate to. The character needed to be understandable and appealing. The next thing we needed to check was ways for Wheatley to move around the environment. He needs to get to all areas of aperture science. Sometimes he needs to lead the player, or sometimes the player would need to bring him along to get to where they needed to go. We looked at some old animation tests for moving turrets in the first Portal game, as well as trying some tests with other types of locomotion.
No one gets in, no one gets in.
Wheatley crab.
What's this? I think I
now the walking turret idea for Portal 1, they decided not to go with, because just to make that game mechanic work best, it was good that the turrets were just staying in one place, looking in one direction. As far as walking or rolling Wheatleys in Portal 2, it just would have been so complicated to sort out the programming and the navigation to get him to move around when we wanted destruction and uneven surfaces and debris. And flying Wheatley would have been even more complicated. And trying to make all that happen, it wouldn't have added worthwhile value to Wheatley for what we wanted to accomplish with this specific game. If it was the Flying Wheatley game, it would be something else. But this game, we really had to focus our programming and level design resources on much more important things like the new gameplay mechanics that we wanted to introduce and the new environments we wanted to introduce. So in the end, we went with very efficient but still fun ways of getting Wheatley moving around, either being carried by the player or traveling along a ceiling rail through the level. Originally, we had many more doors and elevators the player had to use Wheatley to unlock, and as we tested that, we found that players got really tired of doing that. They got frustrated. I gotta use them again, another door. And every time the player could hold and lock and unlock Wheatley was an opportunity where they could drop him or throw him or try to throw him over the catwalk. And so we decided to just cut down on the numbers of times players had to build with that. So most of the time, we just traveled on his rail. So after all of this testing and getting feedback from within the team and figuring out some design ideas, Wheatley was modeled and rigged. It went together pretty quickly. It was a bit tricky figuring out how to make his eyelids work. A lot of the mechanics are actually pretty believable with how he's put together, but if his eyelids had been totally rigid shells, when his eyelids opened, they were going to noticeably penetrate other parts of his geometry. So, and this was a multidiscipline cabal. So the modeler and rigger turns to the programmer next to him and says, "Hey, can you write a script just to collapse the geometry of Wheatley's eyelids when he opens his eyes?" And did that, and so that's how Wheatley's eyelids open. Just the mesh just shrinks a bit, and it works beautifully. In fact, Wheatley was modeled and rigged once, no changes. You worked perfectly. Just all that testing, all that communicating, and all that planning, all that iterating with little temporary play blasts and things paid off. He was a very successful character. And he, even though he had very few controls, just the way that they could be combined and the way all that planning had happened beforehand, got a lot of variety of expression out of him just from combining all those different controls. For instance, he had some acting language with the size of his pupils that could show whether he was relaxed or a little bit concerned or scared out of his mind. His handles, just by being in different poses, could imitate the movements that humans do for expressions and movements that humans do with their brows and cheeks that accompany their talking. So even Wheatley has no mouth, and he talks nonstop. And so having these brow and cheek stand-ins really helped give the illusion that voice was coming from him. And more subtle things like the language of his eye contact and head hook. I'm sure I can get into a lot more detail about this, but just simple things about whether he's focused at you straight on, or he's looking at you but his eyes start darting away, or his head is turned away but his eyes start darting to you. So just say a lot of subconscious things about what he's thinking and feeling. These add up again to tell that he's got a brain and got motivation. And of course, having those big eyelids were very, very expressive. The lower eyelid could come up to help with a hint of cheeks that could work with sometimes when you're supposed to be smiling or trying to appease you. It was all very, very effective. And also a lot of what it went into designing his acting was inspired by hand puppets, which of course then are inspired by human head movements and body movements. There's a way that movements for hand puppets are just stylized versions of what humans do. And and some hand puppets don't even have facial movements, so there's a lot expressed by just how the head of the puppet is tilted, and the speed of movements and how fast and slow things are, or the amount that they're moving. So all of these ideas about stylizing movement that have similar signals to what humans do with their heads and with their faces, that all went into figuring out an acting language for Wheatley. And also with puppets, what you're doing is you've got kind of a repeatable library of little bits and pieces of movements and poses and timing. And your brain is kind of a game engine that's accessing this in real time, because the puppet's being performed in real time. So it's not an infinite library. There's just kind of a certain set of repeatable things that you just keep putting together in different combinations. And so that was kind of an inspiration for how the animation library needed to be established for Wheatley. He had different requirements for different types of animation depending on whether he was being carried or whether he was on his rail. In those situations, his body could be loose and move around. If he was plugged in, the way the plug worked is it grabbed his handles and held him in place, and so the outer part of his body couldn't move. His handles couldn't move. So similar ways had to be found just using the inner shells of his body to express certain emotions. And for some of the time he was damaged, so there were certain animations that worked with that. Because there was limited time to do custom animations for all of his dialogue. His vocals weren't recorded until very close to the end of the game, because so much of the details of the writing of the story and the dialogue weren't really finalized until close to the end. And we knew this was going to happen. So we knew we just had to work towards that plan rather than think, oh, the vocals aren't going to be ready until near the end, so we're going to suddenly throw 20 animators at this guy. Instead, just very early on, once the model was ready and was being dropped into the game for testing, just started working on a library of different kinds of animations that could be layered together so that they could be ready to go once we had the vocals. And I'll show you some of these things, some of these different layers and elements that went into kind of the recipe of making these acting. So just starting out, there was just a very neutral eyelet. Had little micro movements of his eyes, his body parts, and his brows, just keeping him alive. And once that was established, then just the range of animation of his brows and eyelids could just be adjusted to put him into different moves or locked off if he was plugged in. again, so much of this was really based on just a few initial idles or glances, which was like an idle that looked around the environment, and just adjusting the pupil constriction, the eyelids. This one was a bit too crazy. We couldn't really apply this to anything that Wheatley did. So there was some experimentation with that, but mainly came up with a lot of things that we ended up with. Lots of different variety of nods and shakes and reactions and sighing and screaming and that too. Just keep the lights down. Also some animations that played with Wheatley's mechanics. This is him imitating a Univac computer, the tape reel of one of the old computers when he's plugged in. And ways he can use his body in different ways. He's about to be sucked into the tube, and then once he's in the tube, he's having fun rolling around. So just exploring these special capabilities he had because he was a machine kind of gave him almost like fun little superpowers. And there were some animations, once we got the vocals in from Stephen Merchant, there was just some little quirks in his delivery that were just, that he did a lot, and they were very, very unique, and some custom animations were made to go along with those little vocal quirks.
Bring you up to speed on something right now. Hold on, where are we going? Seriously. Hang on, let me just get my bearings. Just follow the rail, actually. Don't choose anything else. Don't touch anything else. Don't even look at anything else. Just, well, obviously you've got to look at everything else to find the escape pod. But as soon as you look at something that doesn't say escape pod, look at something else. Look at the next thing, all right? But don't touch anything else or look at it. Well, look at other things, but don't. You understand? So that a big library of all those big little pieces was created, plus a lot of things were just as simple as had to move up, had to move down, to the side, some tilts, some reactions, just very simple things that were created as we call them gestures, and they're deltas that just can be layered on top of an idle animation, and can just add a head move or an eye move or a blink or a nod on top of the base idle. And what would happen is that the animator would work with the level designers every time a map with the Wheatley was being developed. They'd work out what mood he would be in, whether he'd be plugged in or if he would be damaged. If Gladys was after him and he was scared, he might tend to be doing his base animation just might be a lot of blinking and glancing around. If he was relaxed, then he might just have a neutral, idle, looking at the player, on top of which little movements could be added to go along with his dialogue. And again, all that advanced preparation of preparing his library, figuring out his movement language, and planning with the level designers were needed, because when it came time to put everything together for his final animation, it was just going to be limited time to do that. And this was accomplished using Valve's proprietary animation tool. It's an animation compositing tool called Face Poser. So animations are not created in this tool. Once you have a library of little bits and pieces, you can bring those pieces.
We also have a Face Poser in Gmod.
Face Poser was initially created for Half-Life 2. It allowed a small amount of animators to create a huge amount of content very, very quickly. And that was exactly what was going to be needed for Wheatley. So all of our planning and preparation went into doing his animation that way. And in fact, one animator did all of Wheatley's animation library and his dialogue, all of his dialogue, for the first half of the game. Just one person, very, very quickly. So that that definitely worked out well. And this is a closer view of Face Poser. We've got the viewport that shows the results of the animation that you're compositing together. At the very top is, at the top of this timeline is a wave with the audio there. So this file is initially created as a VCD file, which stands for Battle Choreo Data File, which just starts out having just the audio, no animation in it. Once that is generated, then the animator opens it up, and that's what all these files are, these old VCDs that have been created that have the audio in there. The animator opens it up and starts going over to the library of different movements, different idles, different gesture, delta animations, different, if there were very specific animations like a scream or an eye pop, those could be dropped in. They weren't deltas, they just temporarily would overwrite the idle just to get that animation happening. So all of those lived over here. You drag them down to this timeline, and then you would start layering things. There was a button in Face Poser where you could set what the base idle was going to be in the map or part of the map where this line was going to be delivered. So if Wheatley was going to be plugged in when he's saying this line, you would set that would be the base idle that this animation would be based on. You would look at, once you set in your little bits and pieces for your animation, you'd look at the viewport and see does that dialogue work with him being plugged in, and make adjustments to things. Sometimes if an idle was very active, certain things, certain animation flared on top of it that might break things or be too extreme, so you have to kind of tweak around. But generally, these animations were turned around very, very quickly. There might be a load of like 60 lines all edited and ready to go, delivered, and then those could get a first pass laid on them in like 4 hours, and then they were ready to go in the game. And most of the time the lines maybe got a second pass on them, and then that was it. He had so many lines in the game that had to be done so quickly, and this really ended up working perfectly. So I will show you. This will show you a bit of how one of his lines came together in Face Poser.
There's our handiwork. I shouldn't laugh, really. They do feel pain, of a sort. It's all simulated, you know. But real enough for them, I suppose.
And this will show...
There's our handiwork. I shouldn't laugh, really. They do feel pain, of a sort. It's all simulated, you know. But real enough for them, I suppose.
And it helped that the animator who prepared the library was also the one that was assembling all these animations. So everything could be brought together very, very quickly without having to figure out what all the bits and pieces were. And the best thing about all of this is that a lot of Wheatley's animations were reused for the personality cores. And their vocals were recorded late in production, and we knew that would be the case. So there were a few little custom things that were created for them, but generally that huge library that was created for Wheatley was very nicely repurposed for these guys. And in fact, that overactive idle that wasn't quite appropriate for Wheatley. It worked out perfectly for the Space Corps. Now, in the later part of the game, Wheatley undergoes a transformation. I won't go into the details of that, but for this version of Wheatley, there's a big sequence where it's all custom animated. It happens when the player is restricted in an elevator,
Boo!
And, so there's just one point of view. We would not have to react to the player moving around in the map and have animations that were like in bits and pieces that can turn and react to them. So the player is pretty well in one space, and his animation for this scene and the animation for the wall panels behind him that are reacting is just one huge, long animation scene.
Wow, this is cool. And not onto you too, lady. You know what you are? Selfish. I want you into this pit.
Boo!
So having the wall panels react to everything that was going on, that was not originally the plan, but we had a lot of long speeches there, and the animator who was working on that suggested, why don't we have the wall panels reacting while Wheatley is reacting, which in hindsight totally makes sense, because that was the whole idea. Whoever was controlling that machine was controlling all of aperture. So having those wall panels react in accordance with Wheatley's emotions really sold that very clearly, very visually to the player. But Wheatley's overactive reign of error did not last. In fact, his journey is kind of reminiscent of that of GLaDOS in the original Portal.
Mm.
She was the all-powerful controller of aperture, but ended up destroyed and in pieces. So, but she was this hugely popular character in the original, so we had to bring her back for this one. So we worked out the goals for bringing GLaDOS back. Her return had to be plausible. It couldn't be just suddenly, hi, I'm here again. We needed to figure out a way for her to reestablish control of aperture. She needed to be adversarial again, because players enjoyed so much of that about her in the original. But we didn't want to just duplicate the beats of the original game. And we wanted to expand her relationship with the player. So one of the first iterations we tried with GLaDOS, we really wanted to acknowledge that she was really destroyed at the end of the first game. So she was just this little dangling head that was like a soap on a rope.
I think I used to be bigger. There was a party. Something happened with food. Starts with a C. Cereal.
So then the idea behind this was that in all that discussion and over that time, GLaDOS had lost her memory. She didn't recognize the player. But players didn't believe her. We'd done such a good job in the original game of training them that she was evil in trying to trick them, that they just thought she was alive. And also, after all the anticipation, people just weren't very satisfied seeing her so weak. And also new players that first experienced GLaDOS like that were saying, what's the big deal with this soap on a rope? You know? So we realized, again, just getting feedback from the testers, that we needed her to be impressive and scary and with hints of danger right from the start, but destroyed as well. We had to really figure out how to make that happen. But definitely starting her out being very powerful right away. We did find a way to use a weak form of GLaDOS that worked out much better later in the game. So we ended up exploring Again, with just some really rough play blasts, exploring different movement styles for a different style of GLaDOS.
Well, you found me. Congratulations. Was it worth it? What was that? Did you say something? Neurotoxin. So deadly. Joking.
I'm kidding.
I can take a bath in this stuff. Very, very good. I'm back.
So we, through doing this testing, this was mainly just shown to people within the Cabal. We determined that having her be too human still was too diminishing of her power. She was really most effective when she truly was acting and moving like a machine. We also tested the idea of players retrieving multiple cores to add to her to help revive her and increase her power. But again, we've done such a good job in the first game training the players that she was evil and dangerous and the adversary that they didn't want to help her. They loved the character. They wanted her to be back. They didn't want to bring her back. It had to happen a different way. So we needed to figure out a different way to revive her and get her back in the game. We did a test of a animation simulation that started out with her in pieces and slowly coming together. And this was a prototype that very scarily was tested in front of the public. It was first done within the group. The simulation was completed. People looked at it and were very impressed by it. And about that time, we were wanting to do some teaser promotions and press introductions about the game. And it was decided we should show this simulation of GLaDOS coming together to help promote the game and make people know, yes, GLaDOS will be back. This animation involved some coordination between the modeler, who was also doing the animation simulation, and then another animator who added keyframe animation. And what happened is that this sequence started out as a simulation animation. Originally, she came together and hung up. It was all simulated, but of course she was just a physics object that didn't have any life. So what eventually happened was that as she came together and then lifted off the ground, keyframe animation kicked in. And also during that process, at over one frame, the bits and pieces of her model that were assembled together switched to one complete model